I'm Network Photon. This is the CFF All Access Podcast, and has the Twitter X sphere been hot today? Everybody's talking about Trey Wilson, wide receiver for the Florida Gators. But here, you know what the beauty of it is? Sure, I can argue with Nate Marchese, cheese from the old school. We can get into bickering with Chris K, our good friend. But the beauty of what we do here is every time I look at the NFL ranks, everything is the exact same. Every single, I've got this guy 2 spots ahead of the other guy. That's all you get for variance. You know what you get in CFF? Our friend Nate has Trey Wilson, wide receiver Florida, at wide receiver 43. We happen to think Trey Wilson is a little more talented than that. I have him in the top 15. I think you guys are right around the 10. We didn't have him in our top 10 wide receivers, but I feel confident that he is an outside wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. When it comes to Wilson, right, what I want to talk about is the receiver position in general and what happens with the preseason rankings as opposed to where we end up at the end of the year. What I went and I did is last year I looked at the top 50 preseason wide receivers that we went, a combination of the 4 of us, and took that 50 and went through each tier that I perceived to have, because I broke them up, and went through the hit rate of each tier. All right. And this is important to remember because you're going to be able to see it's fairly homogenous in the NFL, right? You would rather have wide receivers because they're more projectable, because you don't know what's going to happen with running backs, with their usage and with their injury history, right? With wide receivers, we can project that. It's the exact opposite in college fantasy football. And this is what I mean, okay? Last year, of the top 10 wideouts preseason ranked, 4 of them busted, okay? Now, busted is, I perceive them to not be call it top 50-ish type receiver, or not performing to within a reasonable amount of their draft capital. And since I'm Froton, I can do that. So 4 out of 10. Next group, next perceived tier, I got a 9 receiver tier 2. 7 of those 9 busted, okay? So you had a 40% bust rate there. Now we're at 7 of 9. 11 of the top 19 busts for the respective position. Then we're going to get over to tier 3. We had 16 players in tier 3. So we'll have, in the top 3 tiers, we got 35 players, which is basically in a 12-team league, your top 3 wide receivers. Of those 16 tier 3 receivers, 11 of them did not perform to expectations. So for those scoring at home, 23 of the top 35 failed to perform to reasonable expectations. And then that last tier 4 is a bigger tier where we go right to the 50 mark. Tying it up, 35 of the top 50 wideouts preseason rankings did not perform to expectations. That's an even 70% mark. And what I'm getting to here is I want to talk about Trey Wilson. And a big factor I have when I'm looking at wide receivers is this very metric, because I've been doing this for 2 decades. As you know, I am the OG. I need security in my wide receiver rankings. It's the most important thing, all right, when I'm looking at wide receivers. Is this guy going to tank my season by taking him at a prominent top 5 round position? Okay, and I'm going to relate this to why I like Trey Wilson in that top 15 range. Okay, because the low bust probability of his usage and of where he's at. Okay, one of the refrains, and respect to Nate, where he is, a student of the game, excellent when it comes to looking at system history. And he makes an incredibly valid point. How many times has Billy Napier, head coach and shot caller, play caller of Florida, developed a number 1 wide receiver who goes out and just tears up the Sun Belt, right? It's only happened, once in the past 6-7 years? Totally viable point, and I get it. The problem is this is the SEC now, okay? Billy Napier doesn't have the luxury of having a superior system, right? He was one of the big dogs for most of the time he was there at Louisiana. Now, the rest of the Sun Belt has come up over the past couple of years to where, certainly taken over CUSA and the MAC, and I think is probably on par with the Mountain West there in the group conferences. But he had the advantage of being just a better program than everybody else. He could implement that system. It didn't matter. He could rotate. You're in the SEC now, okay? Last year, we saw how it went down. Ricky Pearsall. Let's go through his numbers. 65 catches, 87 targets, 963 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns in only 12 games. No conference championship, no bowl, opt-out. So we had a clean 12 games. A lot of the receivers are looking at when we're projecting, when they're seeing, they have a 1,000-yard season or not, most of them have 13, 14 games that we're projecting off of. Pearsall would have been easily 1,000-yard, 5, 70, 75, right? That's through 12 games. 2.23 yards per route. Not blowing the cover off of things. Pretty solid, but doesn't blow you away. Let's look at Trey Wilson. 61 recs on 71 targets. As a true freshman, Trey Wilson led the entire nation in catch rate for any receiver who had at least 70 targets or more. Number 153 of them. Numero uno, Trey Wilson. Not something to be papered over, okay? True freshman in the SEC. Graham Mertz throwing to him. 0 drops, okay? 538 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, 6 rushes for 55 yards. Basically, he ends up going with 606. Keep in mind, he only played 10 games, okay? So if I'm going to go and say he gets that other 2 games, you have a full 12-game season without even the bowl game, you're looking at 707. 7s across the boards. If you're playing slots, you won, okay? That's 182 points if we're looking at that, which would be completely fine. If we just get Trey Wilson to do exactly what he did and stay healthy last year, Ricky Pearsall, Ricky Pearsall, he's an outside wide receiver 3. He's an every week starter. I sincerely believe that. So right out of the gate, I think for security-wise, he's not going to be reduced in role as a sophomore with a first-round wideout leaving and Shamiri DK coming in to replace him. I don't know about you guys. Shamiri DK, jag. Just a guy, a dude. Gets bounced out of Wisconsin and he goes, follows Graham Mertz to Florida. I'm just not concerned, okay? As you know, Michael, Khalil Jackson, one of my homies. I'm a Khalil Jackson guy. This is the truth. And I do like him, but he's, 6'3", 215. It's a different ball game with 5'10", 180. What you're going to see here is 110 targets, at least 100, and we know how magical the 100 targets are, right? Right, Jared? Thank you. Jared talks about it all the time on Chasing the Natty. I even wrote an article about it last year. Give it a shot. Won an award. The point is, I look at Trey Wilson and I know he's not going down from 777. I'm getting that. That's going across the board. I'm banking on it. I feel like we're looking at likely 90 recs, which out of the gate, you're getting 90 recs. You're a 2. You're a wide receiver 2. You're a top 25 guy if you're catching 90 passes. It's math at that point. He's getting it. He's going to get that work, and his targets only a 2.2 ADOT because he's so explosive when it comes to forcing missed tackles. So the whole usage you're getting out of Trey Wilson, it's projectable. They manufacture touches for him left and right. Over his last 6 games, he had 59 targets. I'm excluding the Florida State game because by the time Florida State, that was the last game of the season, and they literally had no Jordan Travis. They refused to throw the ball, and they grinded it out. It wasn't a normal game. 59 targets over his last 6 games with Pearsall. He's out. I don't care if Elijah Badger does come in. Okay, you can use him on the boundary. You're going to be moving Wilson all over the formation. He's going to be in the backfield. He'll be at H-back. He'll be at slot. He'll be wide. He'll be everywhere. He'll get touches in every facet. He'll get rushes. He'll get manufactured, and he'll get hit downfield. He is going to have over 100 targets. He is going to be the absolute bell cow in a very literal sense for that offense by Billy Napier because he doesn't have the talent or the luxury to play rotating 2 lines like it's a hockey team like he did in Louisiana. He's not coming off the field, Trey Wilson. He's getting 10 targets a game. And at an 86% catch rate like he did last year, sure, it'll come down. Maybe it's 80%. He's getting 80, 90 recs, and he's putting that on the board. And I can bank on it to where I know Trey Wilson is not going to be one of those 35 out of the 50 that bust every single year. Out of that 70% that bust every year, that's not happening with Trey Wilson. And that is why I will pay a premium when I'm drafting for certainty, for raw, explosive, undeniable talent that I think overcomes system, especially when you're looking at a guy who is going to get fired if he doesn't perform in the SEC. He's gone. He needs to win. You will see more completions this year to Trey Wilson, and he will be a top 25 wide receiver 2 at least. Wide receiver 43 is simply too high for me, Nate Marchese. What do you think, guys? That's my cold open monologue. Take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in lockstep with you on that. I mean, this is a guy that, other than the Florida State game where they didn't have Graham Mertz, right? Max Brown was out there. Like this guy, the lowest amount that he had fantasy points wise, I think was 15.8 or 16.8 fantasy points per game. So it's just he combines that nice, like high floor with the potential ceiling that just can be unbelievable with what you said, right? With our boy, Ricky Pearsall, first round pick going to the NFL. I mean, until Elijah Badger or somebody else comes there that's a legitimate threat to him. I mean, this is a guy that Napier's already said we're force feeding this guy targets, as Bainbridge brought up a couple weeks ago on this show. So, one thing that can trump a system is a guy that's just going to get a ton of targets. And that's what you want in a CFF wide receiver.
And that's I was just going to add to that, just piggybacking off that. Malik Washington. Now we weren't spending the draft capital we are on Trey Wilson last year on Malik Washington, right? He was coming off waivers, but it's essentially the same thing. You have one guy, right, as it stands right now, who looks set in line to get all these targets, right? Just a la Malik Washington did last year for Virginia. And then second point with that, when's the last time a Virginia receiver was, or what that staff, when was the last time that staff had a really good top 10, top 20 fantasy wide receiver, right? There's outliers every single year to that point. So, and
particularly a slot wide receiver, right? I mean, that's what Malik was. This is a guy that caught 90 had 90 targets within, behind the line of scrimmage or within 9 yards. Again, that you can profile that for Trey Wilson. He's also going to get targets downfield. I love this. Clint Carlson, though, changing gears a little bit, said 11-minute monologue. Is this a new record, Proton?
No, not even close.
Well, hey, with that, I'm actually transition us. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about our 8 most overrated CFF players, or guys we like to call not Trey Wilson. All right. We're going to get into it tonight. I love Froton starting us with the strong energy and talking about our boy, Trey Wilson, who really doesn't need to be defended, but we will always come to his side at any point. So we're going to talk about our guys. We each picked 2 guys that we feel like were the most overrated, or the most guys that are getting drafted too high in CFF. So we're going to look at some ADP on these guys and then get into why each of us don't like these guys. So the first guy up is Jaylen Raynor. And this is a guy, a QB from Arkansas State. He is currently, his ADP is round 10. He is QB 20 as far as the position. And I'm going to let Zach Hall take it from here. You picked him, Zach. Why do you think that Raynor is going overdrafted?
I did, and I'll be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on him as well. But he's a guy, like you mentioned, he's going around QB 20, which really it's making him a QB 2. Some of these drafts, though, he's a QB 1 for these teams, which if I was going into a season with him as my QB 1, I would be a little bit worried, I think, about that quarterback room for a couple reasons. One, he was wildly inconsistent last year. So one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks that we saw last year. He came onto the scene like week 3. He put up 2 huge weeks, right? 40-point games. Everybody ran to the waiver wire. This guy looked like he was going to be a league winner. And then I actually think he might have lost people their leagues just because of what he did towards the end of the season. And if you continue to rely on him in your lineup, he just wasn't getting you the value that you were really expecting. He, like I said, he had the first 2 weeks, he was over 40 points, looked great. He ran into a Troy defense where he got 6 points that week. Followed up, his next best weeks were QB 29 and QB 31, which isn't awful. But then to end the season, he didn't finish better than QB 95 in the last 3 games of the regular season. So, like I said, just wildly inconsistent. I think the argument you could make is freshman year, right? Is he gonna make a jump and do a little bit better this year? And that's definitely possible. But when I look at their schedule this year, I'm not super confident. They first 2 games of the season, it's not too bad. It's Central Arkansas and Tulsa. I think those are 2 games where you can definitely see him hit that ceiling, right? Like he could explode in those 2 weeks. And then he runs into Michigan, Iowa State. He has a bye, and then South Alabama, who wasn't great defensively, but they stopped him last year. They were able to figure out how to slow him down. He only got 11 points in that game against those guys. And then kind of towards the end of the season, he runs into Troy, which shut him down last year. Usually pretty solid defense. And then Louisiana, who was a top 30 team against quarterbacks last year, looking at how they did against quarterbacks versus their average. So there is really 7 weeks that you look at and you're like, I don't know what we're going to get from him. Some of those are unplayable. I would never play him in that Michigan week or the Iowa State week, right? That's just not, he's not going to get you what you need. He does end the season against Georgia State, UL Monroe, and Old Dominion. So there's going to be some value there. But again, just going at QB 20, a QB 2 on your roster, that's a big risk to me. A lot of times the way that I draft quarterbacks, I always try and grab one of those top tier guys and then follow up with a QB 2 that's really steady, that's really consistent. There's quarterbacks going around the same time as him that I just like a lot better. You're looking at guys like Preston Stone is going after him in a lot of drafts. I'd much rather have Preston Stone. Will Howard, it's kind of up in the air. What's that going to look like? But he's going after him in some of those drafts. Joey Aguilar, who he's kind of a quiet QB, but very consistent. He's going to get you that 25 to 27 every week. So you can rely on him a little bit more. And then the last thing that really causes a little concern for me with Raynor is Timmy McClain, who just transferred there. And I don't even know what to make of that. It was really weird to me because you got to assume that McClain was leaving Central Florida because he was the backup to go somewhere to start. And he goes to Arkansas State, who has Raynor there. So I don't know what that quarterback room is even going to look like come fall. I expect it still to be Raynor, but I don't know. I think that also diminishes his value quite a bit. And he's a guy that where he's going right now, I am not actually touching him at that spot. So that's what I got on him. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Zach.
Let me just address the Timmy McClain part for a second. Like, I think he looked at the situation. My guess is that Arkansas State had Raynor, who started, a handful of games, and then a freshman. I think that's the only scholarship quarterbacks that they had on the roster. Okay. They needed bodies. Yeah. And, outside of New Mexico State, maybe there's not really a landing spot, in my opinion, in college football where you're just going to walk into a starting job. So you can battle I just think that's why Timmy McClain went there. You see a shallow depth chart. There is a QB1 there, but you're not going to find many situations where you're just going to walk into a starting job. So I think the Timmy McClain part is overblown.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is Arkansas State. And the roots of that coaching staff stem from Blake Anderson, who's now at Utah State. But let's not forget the Lane Hatcher, dueling banjo QB situation that Blake Anderson had, and his offensive coordinator, when they were running the 2 QBs, would effectively at that, but they were running it, was Keith Heckendorf, who is, I believe he's still the OC there. He was over the past 5 years. So, like, it's an institutional thing with Arkansas State where they have done it before. It's most of the same guys who are on staff, same OC. There's no reason why we couldn't see McClain, at least on the very least. He's a great runner. Short yardage packages, goal line, when you're within the 5 and they're like, all right, we're gonna bring in McClain and run like a Veer type option package. You think that's not out of the realm of possibility? I think it is. I think it's very much in the realm of possibility and just further clouds this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I would say, like, potential counterpoint is that Raynor is also a very good runner. And now that you have a McClain, that if he comes in there, there's not going to be much of a drop off, very similar skill sets. So maybe they didn't run Raynor as much later in the season because they felt like if they lose him, they're losing a lot. And with McClain coming in, if Raynor does have the reins, so to speak, then they'll just let him run and go off. And that's what he does best. That's what he brings to the table is his legs. So that is the other thing. If you're drafting Raynor, I'm a guy that has drafted a lot of Raynor, which when you put, Zach, when you put him on this list, I was like, oh, crap. Like, I'm going to look so bad, which is great. But like, what I will say is a guy like me, at least while I'm drafting is because of the upside, right? Those first couple of weeks of the season, it showed what he can do if he has the green light to run. But I thought, Zach, you laid out a beautiful argument for why he's overdrafted.
I do want to say, I don't think Raynor is a horrible value. I just don't like him being QB 20. Like, he's a guy to me where if you can get 2 or 3 solid QBs first, and then you're kind of taking that risk because he could give you, like, I have 5 weeks marked where he can hit that ceiling, right? But there's just too many weeks in there where it's like, I just don't think you can count on him. So I would rather have him as that QB3, QB4 on my roster and not take him so high and go for one of those other guys you can get in the same time frame.
Yeah, I like that. One last thing before we move on to Zachariah Branch. If you're going to draft Raynor, you need to come back around and draft a Brady Cook a few rounds later, or somebody that's going to be consistent, that you know what they're going to give you. So you have that high floor, because like Raynor could totally bust. All right. Our next guy that we have on the list is Zachariah Branch. He is going round 7 ADP, wide receiver 31. This is Mike Bainbridge's boy. Well, it's not his boy. It's the boy that he likes to bust on. So
I'm the USC guy.
I don't like to bust on any of these boys.
Froton, that's true. Froton, good point. Froton, you can have a rebuttal here in a minute. But Mike, why is Zachariah Branch a guy that you're not drafting at his current ADP?
Well, let me just ask. I kind of covered Zachariah Branch a few episodes ago, and I want to ask you guys: is there any reason to draft him within the first 15 rounds outside of his 5-star status? I'll hang up and listen.
Within the first how many rounds?
I'll give you. Let's start with 10. I would venture to give you 15 to 20.
Oh boy, 20
outside of his 5-star status. Tell me a reason, please.
Yeah, I totally understand. And having I did draft him, I think in the 10th in one of our 5 Champions League draft. I went to the spring game and I regretted
it. And I see why. I mean, there's just so many weapons there. It's hard to say you're going to draft this guy. I mean,
well, there's other factors too.
Give it to us, Froton.
Well, okay. It's the same problem I have with one of my players that I have coming up here. And one of my fades, it's USC going to the Big Ten. I think it's pretty fair to say that the Pac-12 did not specialize in defense last season. It's almost like they were, burdened by even having to play it. They didn't really want to do much of it. Going to the Big Ten now, you know what I'm saying? Going from USC, you're going from Caleb to Miller Moss. I've had the good fortune of watching both of Miller Moss's starts at quarterback. I saw him against Louisville in the bowl game over at Petco Park in San Diego, and I was at the spring game. He looked great, don't get me wrong, against Louisville. But man, in the spring game, his arm, he came up short on multiple downfield throws. Did not look confident, didn't look like he had the juice to really bring it downfield. Multiple interceptions. It was concerning from what I saw. I think you're going to be relegating that offense to just a shell of what we're used to seeing from Lincoln Riley and his Heisman caliber quarterbacks he's had every single year we've seen. He's working with Miller Moss now. I mean, he just doesn't have that kind of arm talent, frankly. That kind of concerns me because I look at Branch, and I'm seeing his usage in each of these two games. I'm waiting. I'm wanting it. I'm keying on the guy. And he's just getting these shallow, manufactured, but, just game plan touches. And he's not opening it up when he gets it. He's going 10, 12 yards, but he hasn't gotten loose, other than that first game against San Jose State where he looked incredible. The punt return, I mean, it's there. But does it flourish this year for the purpose of redraft? He's got two more. He's only a sophomore. In this particular iteration of USC, first year in the Big Ten, with a quarterback that is definitely not the caliber of Caleb Williams, and playing a schedule that, I mean, they're opening with LSU, then they play Michigan week 4, Wisconsin week 5, Minnesota week 6, Penn State week 7. Okay, so I'm a fantasy owner, right? Week 1, LSU. Okay? I mean, yeah, I know they were brutal last year in the secondary, but this is still an SEC LSU and a turning over USC. Have fun. I mean, you can start Zachariah Branch, but maybe you don't want to. Then you got Utah State, fine. Bye, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State. That is a tough road right out of the gate. You know what I mean? And that's before they go to Maryland, fine. Rutgers, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA, Notre Dame, they end with. Dude, where's the breaks in this schedule? Utah State, they don't have another cupcake on the schedule. It's a different world they're entering, and they don't have Caleb. And if I had to go by when the people I talked to, because I talked to all the beat writers too, Jacoby Lane's the one they're talking about. Sure, Zachariah is there. Zachariah, but, Jacoby Lane is really showing. It's almost like it's a given. Like, yeah, it's Zachariah, but we'll see it. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. I'm thinking round 15 to 20, as Michael is saying. The talent is still undeniable, but
that's how I preface the question, right? Outside of the talent, is there another reason? You talked about the manufactured touches, right? He's not going to get the target share that Trey Wilson's going to get.
No, there's 4 guys who are rotating through.
Yeah,
it's going to be Lemon, right? Deuce, Jacoby, and him. It's all 7 4, and they're going to mix and match, and they can all play.
7 receivers had 25% 25% of the offensive snaps last year or more. I think it's going to be the same this year. Rotation. I mean, if Jordan Addison, Blitnikoff Award winner, couldn't crack the top 30, I don't see Zachariah Branch even sniffing.
He did get hurt too. In fairness to Addison, he got a lot of targets. But
yeah, but like he even had 17% target share, if I'm not mistaken, which is not,
You're right. I'm sorry. I meant he was productive in terms of what he was doing. Like,
sure,
when he's on the field, he was good. It's just I think he missed 3 games, if I'm not mistaken, and that certainly impaired him.
He did not play all stands.
Yeah. Marvin Mims at Oklahoma didn't. I mean, there's been some talented guys that weren't able to put up any numbers in the Lincoln system, and they had stars throwing them.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and again, we've talked about this before in the show, but hey, if you want to go after a USC wide receiver, pick them late. There's plenty of them left, rounds 20
Seriously.
plus. Take a shot at Jacoby Lane there, and some other guys.
Don't take a shit. No, Jacoby Lane, he's mine. Don't take a shot at him.
There you go. Froton's got him. He'll give us a monologue next show on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey, we're going to move on from Zachariah Branch. We're going to talk about a quarterback that we think is being drafted way too high here right after this next break. All right. This next quarterback, I don't think it should be much of a surprise, but Noah Fifita, quarterback, Arizona, is a guy that's being drafted in round 8, QB 17. And that's pretty consistent. I thought that would happen like early on, like in March. And then we've talked about him. Other shows have talked about Noah Fifita being drafted too high. And yet he continues to be drafted really high, around QB 17. We have him in our ranks at QB 38. At least I do. I don't know where everybody else has him. And so that's 21 spots lower than what he's currently being drafted. Noah Fifita is a guy that, for me, like, he just is not going to run the ball enough in order to make up value. And he's not going to probably throw the ball enough either, in order to have value other than, I think he averaged like 20 fantasy points per game last year, right around there. And I think that's what you can expect this next year. But Mike, you're another guy that has been, in lockstep with Noah Fifita. Like, what are your thoughts? Do you think he's overrated, being overdrafted, or would you take him in round 8?
I think it's kind of how you laid it out, right? If I'm drafting a quarterback, I want a high volume passing attack or a guy that can run the football. I don't know that he's going to be in either of those, right? It's going to be a system change this year with the new coaching staff. And what I always get a kick out of some of these, like, just because we have them in the 30, 40, whatever range, doesn't mean we hate the player, right? Doesn't mean we don't think he's a good quarterback, right? Good quarterback, just probably not a great fantasy option being drafted where he is. So that's my opinion on that. Very good quarterback. Absolutely the number 1 or 2 receiver in college fantasy to throw to, and Ted McMillan, but you're not going to run the football enough to score 25 fantasy points per game consistently.
Well, obviously, if we're talking about 4-point passing touchdown leagues, he's significantly hampered by that. And they lose Cowling too, which, to be fair, let's remember, he had double-digit touchdowns. I think he had 13 touchdowns last year. So he could shake guys in multiple ways and certainly helped around the goal line. And he won't have that luxury opposite of McMillan, though. Lamonius Craig is certainly being drafted and needs to be respected. With Fifita and Arizona, you mentioned the change. Brennan's coming in from San Jose State, and you forget, when they had Cordero, they threw the ball a lot. Now, if you go back to last year, it was the exact opposite of San Jose State. You had Kyrie Robinson, you had Quali Conley, and you had a really good, experienced offensive line. They were just leaning on teams, just mauling them on the ground. But that isn't. They were one of the more fast-paced offenses and had air raid principles to them for most of his tenure. That was not the case last season. But I don't see any reason why we wouldn't see them throwing the ball early and often. I'm not worried about the volume. I'm really not. But switching over the Big 12, I think they'll still be plenty competitive. But they're not in the Pac-12 anymore. And they do lose Cowling. We'll see. And unknowns are bad for us. You never like unknowns because it adds conjecture as opposed to having those nice, clean staffs in place. Everything's in place. You want as much continuity as possible. But I can't help but think that Brennan will lean into the Teteroa-Fifita combo and that we'll see more of a Siobhan Cordero-like offense as opposed to the one we saw last year.
Do you guys know at all? I know Elijah Badger visited Arizona. I know he's also visited Florida, some other places. Any ideas if he's leaning to a certain place or if Arizona saw a possibility? And would that change your mind on Fifita if he went there?
You're the one that would know that information, Josh. Scouring the message boards 24/7.
That's my bedtime reading every night.
So just real quick for me, one reason why I haven't invested any shares in him this year is this system. Even if you get the passing volume, like the only time that you're really getting a valuable quarterback is if he's going to run the ball. And you look at Brennan, and his best season was with Cordero in 22, but he had 9 rushing touchdowns. Outside of that, Josh Love, had some good seasons, but he wasn't a QB 33. So it doesn't justify taking him where he's going right now. And then you think about Dino Babers coming in as OC, and all of his success with quarterbacks has been with a guy that runs the ball. And we just haven't really seen a lot of success in this system from a CFF perspective at the quarterback position with a guy that doesn't run the ball. So that's one reason why I'm out on him.
Yeah, those are all good points.
So where would you say is a fair ranking then for Fifita? Where would you guys be comfortable taking him?
I mean, I would go rounds 15 to 20, probably closer to the 20.
So we're talking 20? Like QB 30-ish? Is that would be around 20, if we're talking that? He's going around 10. You have like the 13, 14, 15 QB pocket where a whole bunch of them seem to go. Like that, those mid-teens are really QB heavy. So after that, you wouldn't even take him in that traditional mid-teens run.
Let me ask you, Froton, would you take Malachi Nelson or would you take Noah Fifita?
Fifita, easily.
Fifita, yeah, because it's certain.
Easily.
And I feel like Babers is going to look at him and say, all right, well, I know what this kid can do. All right, maybe he doesn't run as much, but I know what he can do, and you've got the best receiver anybody has seen in their respective coaching careers to work with, and they're going to want to play with him. I feel like that, you're looking at what he isn't as opposed to what he is, and that with the way that they're structured, I think they'll use that. I think so. That being said, I think that 13, 14 is still reasonable given the relative high floor of what they can do. I feel comfortable with. I think he's an elite QB3. So that would make him a QB 25. I think he's right there.
Yeah, and I will say this: it's not that Noah Fifita can't run. I mean, he was a playmaker in high school. It's not like he shows that in his high school film that he can run. He chose not to run last year, but he's a guy that I do. He's not a statue in the pocket. He just chooses to keep his eyes downfield when he's scrambling.
Yeah,
I mean, he's elite.
He's going to put himself in a little bit of danger too. And like when you got somebody with that kind of arm talent, size aside, do you want to? Do you want to run him into danger too much?
That's the same argument with Jaylen Raynor, right? Who's behind Noah Fifita that you're going to risk running him at this point?
Anyone, especially you got the magic Servite connection with Ted. It's like you don't want to mess with that. But 5 rushing touchdowns, a little opportunistic. I think that's reasonable. He's not going to get the big yard.
Yeah,
you're right.
You know what? Let's move on. We'll move on from Noah Fifita. I think we're all in a lockstep agreement. Froton, why don't you take us to Caullin Lacy? This is a guy that transferred from South Alabama to Louisville. He's been going around round 5 ADP, wide receiver 21. But you clearly are not happy with that average draft position. So give it to us. Tell us what you don't like about Caullin Lacy going in round 5.
Well, it's not like I don't even like Caullin Lacy. Because I do. It's, again, this is all perspective. And it's the fact that he's going in the top 5 rounds. Like he's a top 50 pick right now, relatively right in that range overall. I just think with that sort of the variance of what can happen, what we know can happen. And that's why we value receivers high and why they are the best are a premium, like that top 30 that you can bank on, that we perceive that at least are so important. And that's why you're getting the bump on Lacy, is because we perceive him to be safe. The numbers are there. 91 catches on 119 targets, 76.5% catch rate. Phenomenal. 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. Great. 85 85th percentile PFF receiving grade. You get into like the advanced data. Over 3 yards per route. Elite. I mean, top 10 stuff. 8-yard, 8-odd. So he's getting the manufactured touches. He's not 12, 13, 14, 15. He's within that 10-yard range that says, we're getting you the ball and we're letting you run. 9.3 yards after catch. phenomenal. I mean, as good as it gets. It might have led the nation, frankly. It's elite. So 28 broken tackles on 91 receptions, 31% broken tackle rate. What more do you want from what he did in the Sun Belt? That's in Sun Belt. That's at South Alabama. It's with Major Applewhite at the OC. And that's with Carter Bradley, a guy who went to the Senior Bowl. And I watched him outperform quite a few Power 5 quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl. And frankly, I think he hangs on as clipboard holder. He looked great. At the very least, the guy schooled and he knew exactly what he was doing. So he had the benefit of quality QB play in a passing-friendly system in the Sun Belt, South Alabama. I mean, everything was in place. And he's obviously talented as well. 5'10", 190, good size. Great. Now we come to this year. Louisville. We know about the Brahms. Time immemorial. We all know. We've been there. If you listen to this podcast, you don't know about Purdue and Louisville and the Brahm brothers. I'm sorry. But what happened last year? Turns out they had a receiver from the G5. His name was Jamari Thrash. And he was getting drafted in the exact same position Caullin Lacy is getting drafted. Just so happens. Well, what did Jamari Thrash do last year?
He had a hand injury. He did have a hand injury, to be fair.
Had a hand injury, yeah. Well, he had an 11% drop rate, 6% the year before, but then double digit the 2 years before that. Okay? Fine. 63, 858, 6. He had a hand injury, 12 rushing yards. He isn't athletic enough to get more than one touch out of the backfield. Okay, whatever. He goes from 11-23, a 66% catch rate, 2.95 yards per route at Georgia State, 26% broken tackle rate. I mean, the numbers that he had in that role in the Sun Belt and then going to Louisville, it's apples to apples. And while Jack Plummer wasn't a superstar, he was at least an NFL hopeful, and he was dependable. He was good at Cal. He's been in the Brahms system for his entire career. Went to, Bill Musgrave, former NFL OC, at Cal, goes in. System QB knew what he was doing. At the very least, he knows where he's at. Going to Louisville now, right? And here we are. Tyler Shuck. We've talked about Tyler Shuck, haven't we? How do we feel about Tyler Shuck being able to run the Brahms system, staying healthy, doing it, having continuity at the quarterback position? I don't think he lasts the full year there. He hasn't done it in 4 seasons. He's going to do it now. So I don't believe it. 2, they got 2 returning starters at Louisville. Plays an upheaval. I mean, it's just a whole slew. 2 returning starters. One of whom is Chris Bell. All right. Chris Bell, we heard about him all offseason about what a freak this guy is, how he's toasting people downfield, how just everything about him, his profile screams number 1 wideout. We heard it last year. We talked about it before. Here we are coming into the season. We see him in the spring game. Chris Bell's lighting up the spring game. He's looking good. And you're hearing all the same things out of spring, that Chris Bell is everything that you think he is. Well, that's a problem. That's a problem for me because I'm not feeling great about the QB situation. I like Chris Bell anyways. I like his profile. I like everything about him. Caullin Lacy was kind of a manufactured touch guy in a really potent offense. Is he going to just come in and be that automatic one and just say, no, it's my job? He has a similar profile to Thrash. I mean, a hand injury or no hand injury coming over from Georgia State. Until I see the transition happen from G5 to P5, I need to feel great about the player. I like Lacy. I have industry dynasty shares of Caullin Lacy. I have skepticism about taking him as a top 50 overall pick and where he's going currently in the drafts that I've been involved in. I think he's more accurate. Look, if you want to go and play those odds, I would back off and say, give me Chris Bell at the discount. I think it's close to 50-50 of one of them, one of those two is going to be the lead dog. I love Bell. Take the discount. Don't pay the premium. It's the same principle as Branch, but it's a one-on-one. but the other guy is talented and he's already showed out. We've seen in spring. That's how I feel about it. Why pay the premium when you can get the discount at a similar, hit rate?
I think that's a great point, Proton. Brooks is also at that discount, right? Even if you're not a
Ja'Cory
Bell guy.
Forgive me if I don't wet the whistle over Ja'Cory Brooks, everybody.
Hey,
I'm sorry.
That was your boy at one point.
He was my boy, but then.
But I want to ask. But with
disappointed me.
Yeah,
you don't want to disappoint Froton.
Mike and Zach, are you guys the same? Like, hey, would you rather not take the risk on Lacy that early? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Lacy can be a risk. Would you rather go Bell Brooks later than Lacy at current costs?
Go ahead.
Yeah, for me, for sure. Lacy's a guy I've avoided just because of where he's going. And after some of those spring reports, I mean, Bell's a guy that really pops to me. Like, hey, that's a guy you can get where you're not. The value is really good there if he's the guy in that offense. And if he's a guy that's not, and you might only get a few good games, you didn't waste too high of a pick on him at that point. So yeah, for me, I wait for Bell in any drafts that I can get him, which hasn't been very many, but
I would just speak
to acquisition it's late 20s. No, it's late 20s though, like cost of acquisition too.
Yeah.
I would just speak to Eric's previous point about bankability with those top picks, and there's a little shadow of doubt with Lacy. He missed most of spring, right? So just and to be honest, we've seen this in the past. 2 years ago, like we were all drafting, or maybe not all, but like people were taking shots on Brock Thompson, some of those wide receivers,
TJ Sheffield,
and then lo and behold, Charlie Jones just pops up late in fall camp, and it's like, well,
great point.
This isn't unprecedented that somebody other than the perceived wide receiver one for Braum, and somebody else ends up being that guy. So
yeah, that's a great point. Hey, we got 4 players left that we want to get through. So we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back with Jalen Buckley, running back, Western Michigan, after the break. All right, we have Jalen Buckley, running back, Western Michigan. Zach, this is your guy. He's currently going round 5 ADP, running back 26 overall. And I'm going to let you take it from here. I got lots of thoughts on Buckley myself, but I'll let you take it from here, and then we'll come back and I'll hit some.
All right, sounds good. All right, so Jalen Buckley, coming off a pretty solid campaign last year, 1,000 yards. He ran for 10 touchdowns, 4 games over 100 yards, finished as an RB 45. Like you said, he's currently going as right around RB 25. He was going as early as RB 20 in some of the first drafts. I think that was just name recognition probably. In those early February, early March drafts. He's starting to trend more towards RB 28. My big hesitation with him is his OC, Walt Bell. And I just, when you look at what Walt Bell has done with running backs, there's just not a lot of value right there. He's had in the last 7 years, one guy that went for over 1,000 yards. But even in that season, Ellis Merriweather at UMass finished as RB 54. There's just not a lot there. He had over 200 carries and he was still RB 54. So they don't score a lot of touchdowns in this offense, at least historically, the running backs. And it's just there. When you look at the list of these guys, you probably haven't owned any of these running backs that he's had in the system. Outside of maybe Ellis Merriweather for a brief stint in 21, but last year, at Indiana, nobody was owning those running backs where he was at. You would have to go all the way back to 2014, 2015 at Arkansas State with Michael Gordon, where there was a little bit more value at that running back position. But that's the big thing with me is I just don't trust Walt Bell to give us a running back. Even though I like Buckley, I just don't think he's going to give us the running back that he probably could be at Western Michigan. The other piece to this is they start off the year against Wisconsin and Ohio State, which really tough schedule there. And then they face a handful of teams that were top 30 against running backs last year in fantasy as well. So the schedule's it starts off pretty tough, and it's not super easy for this team once you get into the meat of the season. So just a couple things for me that stick out when I was looking at Buckley and kind of where he was going. And again, Walt Bell's the biggest reason for me. But I don't know, Josh, what are your thoughts here?
No, you took them all right there. I mean, look, this is a guy that last year did really well against poor competition and struggled against really good competition. And I think that is just part of being at Western Michigan. But if you start off the season with those two teams, I mean, you're talking about high injury for risk for a guy like Jalen Buckley. So he might not even be the same after those two games. So those are the concerns for me. Do you guys, Mike, you have any concerns here?
I would just say, and we've talked about this previously, like with when you're trying to pair quarterbacks, maybe if you're punting quarterbacks, if you're drafting Buckley, I would definitely pair him with a running back that has a soft schedule to start, right? A soft non-conference schedule maybe at the start of the season. So you can afford to sit Buckley for those 2 weeks. And then, like you said, he did better against weaker competition. And I think we could all agree that the MAC is looking pretty dire at this point. Just, not able to retain the rosters because of the NIL and the transfer portal and everything like that. So that would be my best advice, is to pair him up with a running back if you're interested in Jalen Buckley that has a softer non-conference schedule.
Yeah, that's good.
I'd just like to give a shout out to Alexander Thompson. I mean, he is dropping some bombs in the chat here. Buckley runs like Lieutenant Dan. Alexander Thompson coming hot. My gosh. That's a little rough, Alexander, my friend, Mr. Thompson. He also says Ja'Cory Brooks is the wide receiver to own. I love the chat. Let's go. Wow. We're hot today.
Hey,
we're hot.
Froton, that's perfect transition. We got another one from our boy, Lex. He asked, what about Bert Emanuel? And I think that's a perfect transition to our next player. This is Bert Emanuel. He is ADP round 16. Don't worry, we aim to please here, Tomsy-topia on this show. So round 16 is his ADP, QB 36. Mike, I'll let you take from here. Tell us what you think about Bert Emanuel.
Some trivia. There are potentially 3 starting quarterbacks this year in college football that are former Iowa quarterbacks. Can you name them?
Spencer Petras.
Okay.
Deacon Hill.
CFF prop legend, Deacon Hill.
Legend.
Sir.
Call me Deacon.
I'm out after that.
All right, Deuce Hogan is probably a shoe-in just because they have nobody else at New Mexico State.
Dude. What about our other boy? The boy, opposite Spencer Petras, who made us a lot of money in the 2022
Padilla?
Big Ten championship. Is Alex Padilla? Yes. Is he in there?
That's not the answer. I don't.
Damn it! I was hoping Padilla.
I think he's at. I think Padilla's at SMU.
Let's go, Padilla. Get that man.
It's not going to be for that.
Get on it. He made us a lot of money, that man. I love Alex Padilla.
We were on a live show when that happened, I think.
Oh, we were. We were having a party. They was like, oh, my God.
It was
experts, right? Yeah.
Joey Labus. I should probably know how to pronounce his name. Central Michigan. I'll make this quick. I don't even think Bert Emanuel's winning that job. So I think it's a waste of draft pick. He can't throw. It's simple as that, right? He can't throw. He will be a wasted draft pick, and I don't even have him as my projected starting quarterback at this point. Joey Labus threw for 3 touchdowns in the team's spring game. An Iowa backup quarterback, probably 4-string, whatever he was, is going to beat out Bert Emanuel.
Wow, I have a nickname for Joey Labus that I'm not allowed to put on.
Tomsy-topia will be hitting you up in your DMs later.
Yeah. You just got to throw a vowel in there to Joey's name, and I think you can figure out which one and where it goes. Anyways, yeah, that is absolutely true. And with Bert Emanuel, he is literally, as you all know, I love acronyms. And I love to come up with like terms, the Tito and the Power 3. I have a term, the term for Bert Emanuel. He was the embodiment of the solo threat QB. He is the solo threat QB. He is the Asher O'Hara of 2024. We all remember Asher O'Hara. You guys were all drafting him like he's some superstar because he ran for 1,000 yards at MTSU, and then the market correction came in, and they figured out he couldn't throw. That is what we have with Bert Emanuel. It is Asher O'Hara complex, the brim full of Asher. That's what we're getting.
To be fair, I don't think any of us drafted Asher O'Hara. I think we all thought he was
I know, I'm just
overrated
teasing
too.
you. I know.
We're with you. But hey, Bert Emanuel, the only thing I have against Bert Emanuel is that even though he's a solo threat, he killed me in the industry dynasty, like CFF championship game against freaking JD Yankee. I had like number one team. I think I lost one game all year. JD Yankee starts and goes off for 50, and Micah Wiley goes off for 50. And I was cooked. So I'm not talking about Bert Emanuel anymore. I'm going to talk about LaJohntay Wester. And LaJohntay Wester is my overrated wide receiver. He is ADP round 8, wide receiver 32. And quite frankly, I don't even have him ranked in my top 100. So I'm totally out on LaJohntay Wester. Like I would rather draft multiple Colorado wide receivers over him. But am I overcorrecting here? I mean, what do you guys think is the appropriate range for LaJohntay Wester's? Round 8, round 15? What do you guys got? Zach, you got an idea on this?
Yeah, I haven't taken him one time. If I'm going to take him, it's going to be towards the end of a draft. Like you mentioned, there's just some other guys. I think he have a pretty good spring game though. It sounded like he did pretty well there. I think that probably is going to boost his ADP, if anything, going forward. But that receiver room, I think, has been for me anyways. I haven't really quite figured out how I want to really finalize the rankings there, but he's a guy that he way too high for me. I wouldn't probably take him until after round 20. Just for that possible potential in that offense because they're going to throw the ball. But yeah, it's too high for me.
Mike or Eric, y'all got an idea of what y'all would do with Wester?
I have a fairly hot take about that situation.
Let's get it.
And I have been drafting Will Shepherd all over the place. You got him. I think he went 14th round. I didn't take him last draft. And I wanted to see where he would go because I have almost all the shares of him to this point in the Champions League. So I was like, all right, where does Will Shepherd go if Froton doesn't take him in round 10 or 11? And he went like round 14, 15. I would take Will Shepherd ahead of Wester. I think he's going to be a breakout. He's going to play like that Xavier Weaver role, except he's better than Xavier Weaver. And I think he's going to be awesome. He's the guy I want. And you're getting him in double-digit rounds where Wester's going like, what, 5, 6? Is that about right?
Yeah, like
give me the
Wester's going like 8, yeah.
And it goes along with the power 3 principle, which for you guys, it's just simply potent offenses, 35 points or more, 280 plus passing yards that tend to have the 3 wide receiver sets. Usually you look at those top 2 and the top 2 will be overdrafted. And very, very often you can look at it with Devontae Smith. You can look at it with Jackson Smith and Jigba. You can look at it with Jalen Polk last year. You can look at it with Emeka Egbuka 2 years ago. All of those situations, power 3, potent offenses. The number 3 wide receiver there end up outproducing the 1 and or a lot of times both the 1 and the 2. So when you can target those receivers in the big offenses, Colorado being the prime example here that we're talking about, Will Shepherd is a classic power 3 wide receiver in round 14, 15, while Wester and then part-time, two-way Travis Hunter are going a lot higher in the single digits.
Yeah, we're actually seeing like Hunter's actually going a little bit after Shepherd overall. But do you think that his kind of part-time duty hinders him, and so that just makes Shepherd the clear guy to target? Because they're going right around the same
He's an X.
ADP, right?
He's the X. He's taken over. That's what Weaver was doing last year. He's that outside left receiver. He fits that profile. He is that profile. No one else fits that. I don't think Wester ends up taking that out of Shepherd. Maybe he does. All right. But here's the thing. I'm paying 14th, 13th round. You're paying 5th, 6th. So I'll take the double round discount. I'll wait the 6, 7 rounds, and I'll take the shot on the power 3 wideout as opposed to one of the top 2 in an unsettled room. And
Yeah.
there's still Horn there too to take those slot reps.
Yep. That's
know?
part of my concern there, and not that
And that's
that
what
I
West
think,
will be, right?
right, and not that I think that Horn is definitely not as good, but like Horn runs a 10-600 meter, and he is a good slot receiver that can play. So, Mike, I don't know if you're laughing about
Has
my
pedigree.
love
Yeah,
for
of course I am.
Jimmy
You're
Horn.
the only one that knows its stats.
Timmy McClain's
Yeah,
buddy.
McClain's high school was his high school quarterback. Do we? Anyways,
Just because
Let
we
me
have
just-
C2C
yeah.
and Devi, angles to me and Josh. All right, we
Yeah.
can know some track times. Jeez, man.
I digress. Real quick, Zachariah Franklin, Lex Thompson just asked about him. Last he did was visit University of Illinois, and which was Barry Lunny was his offensive coordinator when he had some good years. So let's hope that he doesn't go there and he goes back to UTSA if they're open to him. But we'll move on from there. Froton, bring us home. We got Jeremiah Hunter, wide receiver, Washington. He is our last overrated player on this list, round 8. And he still's going pretty high even after the Denzel Boston breakout game. Wide receiver, 32 overall. Tell us why Jeremiah Hunter is going too high.
He's getting drafted, Jerem higher, isn't he? Oh boy. Yeah, it's the end of the show. Well, let's take a look. All right, historically, and just go through Hunter so we understand who he is, and I understand the appeal, right? Because this is the appeal of Hunter, and it plays into the safety thing, right? 60 of 90, 965, 5 TDs in 2022. All right, pretty good. 66% catch rate, 5 TDs. Fine. That's in Cal. You should be knighted for that. Last year, 64 of 104. All right, so increase the targets. 756 yards, 7 TDs. Okay, played the 13 games. So got a full season in out of that, but takes a noticeable step back. 92% on the outside. He's an outside guy. Only a 1.75 yards per route average. Now, that is a key metric. I'm always looking at, like, what are you doing in terms of producing? 1.75 yards per route. That is 1/17th out of 150 receivers with 70-plus targets last year, right? So he didn't come out especially productive, and that's important. It's very important because how did he win? Well, he had 21 of those targets were contested. He caught 14 of them. Like, legitimately impressive. 2/3 of his targets contested. And that's something that over his career, he caught 61%. The problem is he has a lot of contested targets. He doesn't separate it especially well. It's just my particular feeling on it when I'm watching him. He's a big guy, but I think you can track him. So 90th percentile PFF grade to the top 3 levels. So he was winning at those spots. So in terms of his ability to he's not a bad receiver. All right. Good hands, all that. But let's look at system fits and how this all matches up into where he's going and how he's going to work. Cal last year, 31 points per game on offense. Right? Good off, 32nd in the country. Allowed 34 a game on D, 115th. They're in shootouts all the time. They're in a position where they're trailing. They have to play catch up. They had to throw. Either it's Jaden not busting one or they're throwing all the time. 16th in pace of play, ripping off a play every 24 seconds. For perspective, now going to Washington, where Jed Fish is the OC, 75th in pace of play. Worst defensive conference in the P5. Now, Washington. First-year head coach Jed Fish, right? They bring in him, Will Rogers, Jonah Coleman. What did Jed Fish do at Arizona, right? In his first year. 17 points per game. Threw for 226 a game with Jaden Delora. We, again, used the transfer method. Plenty of transfers there for Arizona when he came in. It's the same thing here for Washington, okay? Zero returning offensive starters for the Huskies. 7 transfer starters. 4 of them are offensive linemen. Okay, so totally rebuilt line too. Least returning offensive production in the entire FBS. 134th on offense in terms of returning production. It's a to the studs rebuild. This is not the Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb Penix, and the three amigos outside. This is nothing like that. This is a reset. 17 points a game last time Fish had a reset. And he was doing that in the Pac-12. Oh, were they playing? That's right. We're in the Big Ten. Let's go through this schedule. Weber State and Eastern Michigan. Congratulations. Nice start. Washington State allowed 29 points a game last year. Cool. Now let's get into the Big Ten schedule. Northwestern, 24 points a game. Great. Play slow as molasses. David Braun taking over Fitzgerald there, defensive head coach. Slow. Rutgers. Great. Delightful. They're going to grind you out with 5 offensive starters returning and Kyle Monangai and substandard Ethan Kaliakmanis. Then you get Michigan. Then you get Iowa. Then you get a bye. And you get Indiana. Then you get USC. Right? Fine. Indiana and USC. Penn State. UCLA allowed 19 a game last year. Oregon to end. End scene. I mean, let's talk about startability here, okay? This is a very important thing in fantasy football, all right? I count 5 games I can start them, and you got 2 buys. And the worst slate he gets Penn State, UCLA, bye, Oregon. That's the playoff run. That's when you need them the most. You're going to trot them out there against Penn State? I'm not doing it. 5 startable weeks that you can have a straight go at Jeremiah Hunter on a rebuilding team in the Big Ten. I'm going to have major pucker factor every Saturday morning that I own Jeremiah Hunter in a non-best ball league, and I got to be like, do I want to give this guy a starting spot against Iowa, against Michigan, against Penn State, against anybody, against Rutgers? Because you don't know. All it takes is a couple of tough weeks, and it's like, hey, Jeremiah Hunter, hit the bench, pal. I drafted you wide receiver 24. Hit the bench against Rutgers. If you can't play him then, what are you doing? How can you take him there? Anybody I'm looking at and I'm saying I can't start you half the season, I'm not taking his wide receiver 24. He's overrated in a bad team in a tough conference.
All right, real quick, Froton, would you take? So Jeremiah Hunter was going 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th round. Yep. Would you take Denzel Boston in that range? I know you're a fan, but would you take him in that range? Or do you think just Washington?
I don't have to. Because
I know you don't have to. It's hypothetical.
Denzel Boston is Washington Chris Bell. He's the exact same thing to me. You heard him all offseason. He couldn't crack it because you had 3 gods in front of him. And now it's his time. Like, do you want to be fading that guy who got ball washed all season, all fall camp, and dominated the spring game? It's almost the same thing. Like, I don't want any part of it, except at least with Caullin Lacy, I can look and say, all right, Brom, okay, I get it. What's my comp for Jeremiah Hunter? Okay, Jed Fish, year 1, 17 points a game, Jaden Delora, that crap offense post-Sumlin. This is a mistake. I firmly believe this. Well, he should be up there in 43, wide receiver 45-50. Okay, 45-50, a wide receiver 4. Fine.
I love this. This show has come full circle. We're back to wide receiver 45. Froton, that Hunter rant, that's got to at least drop him to round 15, which I'm great on that. We don't need to talk about Denzel Boston. We don't need to elevate him at all. But hey, Bainbridge, I want to give you the floor for one last player that you wanted to talk about as overrated, and then we're going to close this show out.
I'll make this quick, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I love Josh. He's going to officiate my wedding.
Uh-oh.
Froton, your wedding invite still pending. You haven't sent it back yet. Love you too. And I'm pretty sure I've seen you guys draft him, Josh more so than you. Jeremiah Smith is a wasted draft pick.
Oh!
If I have a criticism with Josh in college fantasy, it's that you think it's Debbie or C2C and you don't realize that it's college fantasy, okay? Jeremiah Smith is a wasted draft pick for Ohio State.
Dude, he's once in a generation.
And you're drafting him in the 13th round.
He's generational.
Cool. Wide receiver.
And you got him in the 15th round.
Cool. Wide receiver 2s for Chip Kelly. You got wide receiver 457, wide receiver 110, 445, 423, 334, 177. Wasted draft pick.
But he's so sexy.
Cool.
But there was this one time that I drafted Travion Henderson. He killed it.
One time.
Nah, I'm not gonna.
No,
I will say.
listen,
I will
Mike,
say Jeremiah Smith.
Your head is right. Our heart is in our heart's place.
Well, and here's the deal. I'm going to defend myself a little bit. Look, Cedric Baxter last year started out as the RB1 for Texas. Did he end that way? No. But I had a ton of both Baxter and Brooks in the 20th round. So, you just got to cover your bases. I will say I'd rather draft Jeremiah Smith where he's going than Emeka Egbuka at any point before him, quite frankly.
Dude, he went 8th, 9th round last time. 8th round, Egbuka? Ain't bad. I know it's Chip Kelly, though.
I think Jeremiah Smith is going to be the wide receiver one in that offense.
Wow.
I think he's unbelievable. We'll come back to this. Bookmark it, stamp it. Let's go. He's taken over. I mean, his dad basically said that they showed absolutely nothing in the spring game in order to hide him. So we'll see. I could be wrong, but look.
I would say at overall point, don't confuse Debbie with college fantasy, folks. Okay?
Yes.
Not the same.
Yes.
5th
totally agree.
round of Jeremiah Smith is totally defensible. I don't think he's the number one, but fits the power wide receiver 3 theory. It's still Ryan Day. Ryan Day is still the offensive guy. He's still calling the shots, okay? There will still be passes thrown. I'm not worried about that.
Yes.
But you make a good point, Mike.
It is a question mark of how much Ryan Day is going to have his fingerprints on this offense. One last thing, 863 Kane says he should be at Miami. That's my boy. Yes, we are all heartbroken that he did not end at Miami. But with that, we've come to the end of this show. We cannot go on any longer. So therefore, nobody else can get in a word. Thank you guys for listening. Hey, if you liked Froton's Rain at the beginning, and if you liked our circle that we brought it back together, wide receiver 45 for Jeremiah Hunter at the end, then please like, subscribe, comment. We love doing the show. We love all the comments. Tom Cetopia bringing the heat in the chat. We love all of it. We want this show to be interactive and engaging. And so thank you guys for all of that. We'll be here every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. But that's it for tonight. Until next time, do small things with great love.